Hey, welcome back, everyone, to the Prodcast. This is Google's podcast on SRE and production software. This is a fun one. We have a guest that actually was from way back. Adam, you helped start the Prodcast when it was strictly internal. I think it was you and John, right?
That's right. That's right.
In the San Francisco office. And then we also have Matt is here with us today. Hi, Matt. How's
Hello.
it going? And I'm Steve. I should say that I have a name also. And Adam and I met in the San Francisco office at Google way back in the olden place. But I think you worked at other places before that and work at different places since then. Is that true? That seems like the truth.
That's the rumor and also the truth. I was at Google for a long time. I came over via the ITA software acquisition. I'm wearing my ITA software shirt, which is confusing
one, right?
and it makes
thing.
the airplanes. Yeah. We made flight search and we made airline reservation systems. I was on the reservation system side. Google bought us largely for our flight search side, but powers Google Flights to this day. Nice. I was out of the Cambridge office, moved out to San Francisco, where I did meet you, Steve. And this is like 10 years ago, more than that, 12 years ago, 13 years ago.
I try not to count years.
Sure,
It's a lot
it
of
was yeah, back when we were both 21, and then we. Yeah, and then I was at Google for a long time. Loved working at it. Loved working with folks like Steve and Paul, who's you can't see him, but he's here, and all the folks over there. Super smart group. And wanted to start my own company, so I left to start and build startups.
That's awesome. Adam gave a very good talk that I think is on the internet somewhere, which is about like how flight search is actually complicated, even though it doesn't feel like it should be. So I highly recommend checking that out if you have the means. We'll put it in the show notes or something like that. But basically, like there used to be a lot of Lisp and curly braces and stuff back in the day, and like mainframes are real still to this day, I believe.
That's
but
right.
My favorite take of yours is that the airline industry doesn't count nines because they have a 100 instead.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. They have 100% uptime, no nines.
So it turns out it's possible, but only if you spend a lot of money and time and do a very limited set of things and have a huge amount of, complications, redundancy, and plans and things like that. So it's a pretty cool background. But I'm guessing you don't do flight stuff anymore. Is that true, Adam?
Yeah, that's right. I left Google to build companies, and the first company I built this is back before we had LLMs, and we just talked about machine learning, which really was just like fancy math.
Decades ago, I'm sure.
Decades ago. Hundreds of years ago. And did some stuff in the mobile space on that. Built some real-time stream processing engines that were really neat and sold those to a security firm. Did really cool threat intelligence security stuff for a while, which I loved. Started another company that did called Bit.io, which we did serverless Postgres. First to market serverless Postgres. Everyone loves serverless things now. And everyone loves Postgres. So that was super fun. Did that for a bunch of years. Bought by Databricks. Worked at Databricks, left Databricks, and now I'm running a company called MarketStreet, where we are helping small business owners have a platform to communicate and collaborate on. So it's like really far away from everything I've ever done. It's not infrastructure related. My joke when I raised money this time was like, look, I shouldn't be allowed to make websites. I should only be allowed to make command line tools. But here I am making websites. So I don't know what happened. The world is topsy-turvy and upside down.
What's new making websites these days? It can't be any different.
Yeah, it shouldn't.
You just ask. Yeah, you ask an LLM to do it for you because you don't know how to do it. So and you use there's like server-side TypeScript or something like that. There's like Next.js and like all those things. It's wild, the advances in the website technology.
I actually just did this the other day, Adam. I vibe coded my own personal website that I've been meaning to do for a long time. I actually just was like, yo, computer, just like search the internet for my name and videos of me and like make a website for it. And it just did it. And it's
amazing.
And I was like, okay, you say so.
You're like, I hope it works.
Yeah. I did it too, Steve. It was great.
Really?
Your website also, yeah.
The vibe coding thing is wild. Like I had to learn to think bigger. I used to decompose in my head the problem and be like, make an auth page. And then it's like, I'm like, maybe I should just ask it to make the whole thing. And then it just made the whole thing. And then I had to use like every aspect of my years of experience to debug the problems that the LLM made, and like how to deploy it and how to launch it. And like, it turns out like SRE matters at that point, right? Like, cause you're just left with like a bunch of TypeScript and people start saying stuff like Docker or containers.
Okay, I think you just hit like on the first knot in the wood here, which is cool. So a lot of great automation gets you something up from nothing, and then you take your wisdom to it and you look a little closer and you're like, oh wait, there's something wrong here. There's a lot right here. This is great, but, and then a whole lot of buts. So tell us how that's going. Where we are compared to where we were, say, 5 years ago is miraculous. And yet there's a whole lot of caveats, and but some stuff. So tell us about the stuff.
Yeah, it's funny. I can give like a real practical example. So like we're building the stuff I'm building now involves a lot of data management, right? To make sure our LLMs can say smart, intelligent things, and the deployment of sort of like that, what we would call like ETL, directed acyclical graph execution, right? Like stuff. We deployed it on Vercel because like we used V0 to help build it. We used Cursor, we used Vercel. And then like I can't have long running background functions in Vercel, right? And this is like something that I think if you don't know what all those words I just said mean, and you don't know what to do. Yeah. So I'm like, okay, well, I'll switch over. First, I thought it was like my backend database provider. So I switched those to a different one. And the different one is like, you can't use async IO against us. We blow up when you do that because we have like 95 proxies in the way and they are not transactional aware. So then we moved again and then like had to deploy on like fly.io instead of Vercel it's like a nightmare. Like, and all those technologies are great. Like they significantly enhance you, but how do you, if you don't know what all that stuff is and have spent a long time in a career building that out, like how do you interpret that? Like even asking the LLMs, like pasting the async IO Postgres error into, they're like, sorry, I don't know what to do, right? Like you get to a point where it just doesn't know, and there is like a little specific.
Yeah, a lot of these platforms have like these constraints in them, which is great, and like it helps them execute well. But if you don't understand what the constraint is, you don't really know what to ask for or how to. More importantly, I guess, is how to interpret the when it doesn't work situation.
Yeah, I think that's like a critical skill, and it's this interesting gap of like. I don't know how people are going to get to that point. Like the actual infrastructure side is very challenging still, right? Unless you get these narrow guardrails that that don't scale necessarily, or they don't have all the things that you expect and want. I don't know, but on the flip side of that, like I think from a startup perspective, like in many ways you don't care if it works well enough and you get your minimally viable product out. Like you worry about those other problems later, and you can hire someone to solve them. Right. So I have like a bit of a curse where I'm like, oh, I know how to solve that problem. Like I'll just dive in, and then like 2 days go by, and I'm like, why did I do that? Right. But you have to it has to work, right? Like, and if you're building anything of significance, I think it matters.
Well, I know that sometimes SREs over focus, I guess, on like eliminating technical debt. But I believe a lot of tell me if I'm wrong, but a lot of startup work is ignoring technical debt, right? It's just like powering through. And like, is this like a problem in your SRE heart of hearts, or
it was initially? Right. I'm much better about it now, but it did take a long time to learn. And now I call it swiping the credit card of technical debt. Like, so that you know that you're like accruing debt and it has interest, right? You want that like metaphor real strong in your head to know. Yeah. But there's nothing wrong with it. Like in a sense, and in a startup, you're fighting for survival. So in a way, like if it doesn't all work, you just declare bankruptcy and like move on, and all that technical debt goes away. Who cares, right? Like, or another way to say it is like users matter more than like perfect code and perfect like. In a way, you care more about product market fit than anything else, and growth more than anything else. And so technical debt doesn't matter, almost like to the point where like some aspects of security are like, yeah, I'm not doing this perfect, but like I'm going to change that later. Like, but you are swiping a credit card of technical debt, because if you become successful, if you find product market fit, you owe on that, right? And I think that's true in many cases. There are examples, counterexamples that would be like if you're building security software, if you're building crypto software or cryptography, and you're like doing stuff like that, or Bits.io where we did databases, right? Like we have to have ACID semantics. Like you don't have ACID semantics, like people notice and they get mad, right? Like it is a tremendous thing. So, or a tremendously important thing. So there are special cases where you're effectively selling reliability or security as part of your product, and that, of course, then you have to do it right. But when you're not, you have to learn to ignore all that stuff in some ways.
Yeah, I think just to like belabor the metaphor a little bit, like if you're swiping the credit card of technical debt, like it helps to understand that like $1,000 of debt versus $1 million of debt, like what currency are we using? Like is $1 million a lot? I'm not sure.
Yeah, like no, that's a great point. Yeah,
like is this debt that we're accruing? Is this something that we will be able to, like, if assuming that we do succeed, is this a thing that's just going to ruin us in post acquisition or just before acquisition? We might be a little bit worse. Things like that. So maybe you have to have your eyes open about this debt in terms of being able to understand it and not just blindly swiping. But you still accept it. You still like mark it on the table and move on, I guess.
100%. And I think part of that is that risk management and how it tactically applies. The like sort of flip side of that same metaphor is that you only have so many innovation tokens to spend. And like you really want to be spending them on the things that get you product market fit and serve your users or serve your growth or whatever, right? Like whatever you're trying to do. And you don't want to spend it on, moving your database and cloud provider 17 times over a weekend, right? Like, and yet that's what I did this weekend. So, this is like a what is the expression of like the kids don't have shoes or whatever. Yeah. But I can't let go sometimes. It's a problem.
So a second ago, you said this now, market fit. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I read an article about what people are using AI for in product ideation, like the brainstorming process very early on in the infancy of a startup, or even before you're getting that point. So just what do we want to build, or what is this thing you have a kernel of? And before I even get a whole bunch of engineers in a room to make slides or even slap a bunch of code together, just have the AI concept a bunch of websites, make some ideas, and then you have the people with deep pockets look at those things and go, nah, I can't understand why you want to build this. Are you seeing now much faster iteration on discarding bad ideas before they get to engineers spent time on, or are we now seeing things built a little more thoroughly?
Is it getting better or worse?
Yeah. Are we failing faster at bad ideas, or are we building them out more thoroughly before we
DDoSing the VCs? Like what's
that's a good
that's a good So I think my journey on this is a little different than some folks. There are like founders and CEOs and entrepreneurs and stuff that are like incredibly passionate about a specific product or problem, I should say. And those people are like, they're like, my life is designed to fix healthcare or whatever, right? Like, and I love those people. They're going to do their thing no matter what. I'm much more of a like, analyze the market, come up with a bunch of ideas during the brainstorming phase. Like me and the person I built the first two companies with, like we have a spreadsheet of like 150 ideas, right? Like everything from like, and we've been just building it for 10 years. And like everything is on there. We have stuff, great ideas, what I call great ideas, like what if we had house blimps? What a great idea, right? And then obviously ship it, right? Like ship it. And then, or like practical ideas, like literally serverless Postgres was on there, and that's what we built. And then we just keep adding columns to these rows in the sheet that are all the exclusion or inclusion criteria. And why I bring this up now is that what AI has really changed for us in the ideation phase, or that idea maze is the cool startup kid way to say it these days, is like, what is venture fundable? So for us, with AI, you can build so much faster with so many fewer engineers, and you can get to prototype phase and you can test if it works so much faster that is great, because you get to find out if you have product market fit, you get to do all these things and much cheaper and spend less money. But it also means that everyone else in the world has that ability also, right? So like your moat, the thing that protects your company or your idea, right? Like you need to find new moats than you previously had. Was like, we were just a bunch of smart technologists and we built hard technology and wrote a lot of code, and that's our moats, like our intellectual property, et cetera. But now someone else can be like, yo, vibe code me Instacart, right? Like, and they do, right? And the moat is a lot different these days. And so you have to find new aspects. With what I'm building now, the aspect is community and networking, like between people. I think those connections are persistent. I think, GitHub has that. I think you look at long-term valuable things have that side of community, or they're like 10x technologically better. And the LLM's not going to build something 10x technologically better. And it can't do the community side of it, but it can do so many other consumer apps or SaaS, infrastructure SaaS is a great thing that like the LLMs can do that, right? Like, and they will build that and it'll be fast. And so I think it changes the dynamic. I think you do get a lot of people spamming, I added AI to X to the VCs, but I think the smarter VCs are saying like, how is this going to possibly 100x my investment when anyone else in the world can just ask the LLM to build the same thing? And so you need to have a different lens, I think, when you're choosing your ideas, and it has to be that lens of like, one, it has to have a lens of like, is this just a Jira ticket at OpenAI or in Gemini, right? Like, is this just going to happen in 2 years, right? Like, is this some like product manager just going to do it? And then also like, what makes this sort of AI proof, or what builds a moat that defends it against other people, vibe coding it as well.
So taking us to the general theme of our podcast here.
Yeah.
How does it mature? How do you unlock the achievements of requires reliability engineering now? Like we go from thing with slide deck to thing with random website with some, we bought some time in the cloud to, okay, we have some employment, we have people building stuff, and now there's stuff that people use and they expect them to stay running. When do you decide it's time that we don't just have stuff that's running, we have actually people accountable for running and we have expectations?
Yeah, we have to growth now.
Yeah.
Tell us about your long arc of experiencing this here and in your own industries.
Yeah, I think and Bit.io is a good example of this, where Bit.io is serverless Postgres, so it has to work, right? But it also has this unique thing where with serverless Postgres, the goal is in a way is to shut the machine down, shut the compute down when people aren't using it, right? But it's a database, so how do you do that? How do you do that safely? How do you do that without corrupting data? How do you do that with transactions in flight? What do you do? Time them out? Do you do, and you have to start thinking about those things. But when do you start thinking about them? You start thinking about them when you have what I kind of consider as a successful failure, if you will, right? You have some user using you and they're like, yo, this thing broke. And they're mad about it because it means something to them. Mm-hmm. But hopefully it's not it's not something you can necessarily anticipate or see, because you should deal with those if you can see that. But you want to have enough load. You effectively want the Twitter fail whale, right? Twitter did an amazing thing of turning the fail whale into marketing, genius. I don't know how they got that done, but genius. And then you say, we have to spend time on this because it matters, or we're losing customers, or people are noticing, or whatever. And I think that that isn't to say, I think if you can, you should plan it well. You should take care building your software to plan it well. You should know where your problems are going to be, back to the credit card thing. Of technical debt. But I always think about it as when my users notice or complain, or if it's some fundamental problem in the entire product I'm offering. Is reliability, like we said earlier, is reliability and security part of my product? If it is, then yeah, it's got to be built in. But man, you got to wait till the user tells you something's wrong. Because if you don't, you'll build the wrong thing. You'll invest all this time in fixing a problem that doesn't exist.
So if we can follow the model that you're describing here, and let's say we have a couple startup founders who don't have a reliability background, don't have a security background, and they're not building a reliability or security product. They're building a consumer product or whatever. They're building Instagram too or whatever. At what point would what's the switch where you think a founder has to be we need an infrastructure person, or maybe not infrastructure, but a reliability person. At
reliability
what point do you
or security person. Yeah. And I think that when you start seeing the growth,
a specialist, right?
Yeah. I think when you start seeing the growth, when you can sort of project your growth curve out of users or whatever, in the consumer app space, where you're saying if this keeps going this way, right? We are going to run into these problems. You should make those projections and say. And it can be hard to know, right? Like you said, in this case, if you have a founder who's not a SRE or security person, or just doesn't have exposure to what can fail and when it goes wrong, I think that they still need to. You should still sort of say to yourself, "We're growing so fast. How does this impact what I've built? How does this can the choices I made, which in a modern startup, right? You're composing it of SaaS services. A modern startup is like I said earlier, you use Vercel and Fly and Supabase and Neon, whatever, right? You compose all these other SaaS services, which is not traditionally how you do it, right? Usually it'd all be in one cloud provider. And you may need to go in that direction. You may need to go. I think eventually one of the reasons the major cloud providers are so successful is that they offer such a coherent and built-in policy around, they offer you this path to scale and this path to security, with the downside of the complexity that comes. But I think it's you just always have to be looking at your growth and say, question your underlying building blocks. Do they work? Are they big enough? Are they strong enough? It's hard.
Another thing that you mentioned was, and maybe I'm projecting here a little bit, but it sounds like the story you're kind of getting at is also the failures that you're going to encounter when it comes to scaling up. You can't actually see them coming. Some of them, maybe you're well, last time I did this, it was when we got to 1 million concurrent sessions per whatever. But now you're on Fly or whatever, right? You're on, service.foo that has never existed before. And so maybe their ceiling is much higher or much lower. And so there is this community out there called Learning from Incidents. I don't know if you've heard about this one, but it's basically I don't know. When I first heard about it, it totally made sense to me, even though I hadn't heard their actual background, hero story or anything. But it was like the way that you scale things over time is that you fall occasionally and you learn when you fall and you're like, aha, that's where the bump is. We found the bump, right? And the trick is to be able to fall kind of gracefully, to extend the metaphor a little too much, to only fall, in parts of the globe at once, potentially, if that's possible, like in some of your user base, so we get into like the continuous deployment, but across failure domains in like a, gradual rollout kind of way, blah, blah, blah. So like, I guess what I'm getting at is like in that modern infrastructure, world that we're talking about, like, how many of these principles like transfer effectively? Like, from you and I worked on Borg together with GSLB and all the things inside of Google. Like, do these words, I mean, not those words exactly, but like, do these concepts translate into this like today's operational world? And do people get it, or like, is there a Rosetta Stone that needs to be built for this world?
Yeah, I think there's definitely a Rosetta Stone that needs to be built from Google out. Yeah, if you're a Googler and you want to, I'm not encouraging any Googlers to quit. If you want to build a startup, I think you will need a Rosetta Stone, right? Like the way we build software at Google is very different. However, I think you have things like the SRE book. You have just the simple thing of like, ask the LLM, ask Gemini, like, hey, I have this, I am deploying on Vercel with Next.js. My user rate is growing. Like, where am I going to run into issues? Like, you can just literally ask that question, and it will give you good answers, right? Because a lot of these best practices are well codfied that the LLMs know, and they'll be good enough to get you to the next step. And then you can literally it'll start saying things like, often scaling comes like, check your database, right? Like, are you on some like free tier of some sketchy database? Like, maybe don't do that. Like, do you have indexes, right? Like, and the big gap to me would be, we still I talk to a lot of founders, technical founders even, and they just like that idea of like create indexes in your database. That idea has been around for 50 years, right? Like, I mean, literally forever, right? And that is still like mind-blowing science to a lot of people, right? Like, they don't think about those problems, right? They just assume that it does it all right for you. And so I think the luxury we had at Google, or you guys have at Google, is that a lot of those things, one, there's very smart people like you guys to answer those questions when they come up, but also there's great frameworks to handle it, and we've thought a lot about it. But we thought about it in the context of the infrastructure Google has internally built, which is very different from what the rest of the world is like. You don't get those things. You don't have GSLB. You don't have even down to like the disk infrastructure of like D and like all the way up, like to big table. You don't have those things, Colossus. Like, you don't have any of that, and you have different assumptions on how things are built.
This really brings to mind something like two things come into my head. One is, first of all, you've done this sort of meta hero's journey a few times, which is kind of fascinating to me, which is going around the clock with multiple times of, okay, first you have nothing, now you have toy website, now you have toy website with superpower X, and then let's put thing on cloud, and oh, never mind, scrap that, let's do it again. Like, okay, now you have a magic flute, and you're going to go into Castle X. Okay, so my question is, the actual question is, so you take some off the shelf, perhaps, open source tools, then migrate to possibly paid sources made by third party, then you go, actually, that thing can't do a thing I need because it won't scale. What is that like to migrate from paid tool, sort of does what you want, now you're going to do it yourself?
No,
what's that you're doing it yourself part like? Because it's big, because you're going to do it, it's got to scale up for the thing you're doing, and now you're writing it yourself and you have to support it. And my guess, that's where the quote fun happens, and scaling and the reliability part becomes scary, and opportunity. That I find really fascinating.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think there's like these inflection points. Now, for me personally, and for the last co-founder and my current co-founder, like, we come from this background. So I'm like excited. Like, I'm like, great, I get to do cool shit. And then everyone who's ever worked for me reminds me, it's like, no, you don't. You have to go talk to an investor, right? Like, you're not allowed to build any of those things. But that is a scary, the migrations are scary first, right? Especially if things like database migrations, or fundamentally like the stateless web migrations can be fairly straightforward. But migrations between database providers, authentication providers, things like that. Migrations from a like alternative cloud to like an honest cloud platform, like AWS or GCP or Azure or whatever, right? Like those are hard, and they're hard for a lot of interesting and not fun reasons. Like if I never have to deal with IAM and policies again in my life, like it would be like happy, right? Like I'd be in my happy place. But you have to deal with them, and they're there for a reason, or like. Try explaining, like, oh, well, you need a private link between these two VCPs. By the way, you want to be multi-cloud, so like those terms don't apply in other clouds, right? Like, how do you set up a redundant VPN link between two clouds? Like, yeah, you hire a specialist. Like, this is an area where you that's very, very hard. And so I think there's the reason these alternative clouds exist for people like me or people who are building startups is because they want it to be easy. Bits.io, the whole premise of Bits.io was like, it sucks to run databases. Don't ever think about it again. And we will tune it. We will do the right thing. We will scale it up and scale it down for you. Like we'll do all of that for you. Like, and that was successful, right? People love that. They still love that. There's Neon and Supabase exist because of that. But yet eventually, yeah, you got to move sometimes. Sometimes you have to move because someone buys your company. And all our people at Bits.io, I apologize when we got bought and we had to move databases. That sucks. Sorry. I hope we helped you. Yeah, those transition points are hard. They're very, very hard, and they're still hard, and no one has made that easy.
Doing the classic podcast thing, we now require you to predict into the future. Projecting from what we've been talking about for the next 1 to 2 years, like what else do you see that will become weirder or less of a pain in the butt or something? Like how does this arrow point forward?
It's going to be significantly easier to create software. And that actually I love. Like I've spent a career trying to build tools that make it easy for people to build software, like developer tools and things like that. Like it's one of my big things is like software is the most amazing thing that we've come up with. I think of a problem and I solve the problem. Amazing. And I think it's just going to be easier and easier to do that in 2 years. You're going to have hyper specialized, hyper quick builds. You're going to have a lot more internal software built to solve internal problems that will be very customized. I think you're going to have a lot less need for software engineering. In the traditional sense, you'll have more product people build software using the vibe coding stuff and all that. And that'll all be net good initially, I think.
What about some sort of some happy coexistence between us and the robots?
Yeah, I definitely think that's possible. I mean, the whole premise of the company I'm currently building, MarketStreet, is that the human connection is the important part. Right? Like small business owner to small business owner, those people will still exist. They will have, they're doing real problems, talking to real people, like they're working in those spaces. And I think that AI can complement a lot of what they do and help them, grow their businesses without being extractive against them and can help bring to them, help build human connection, right? And help build human outreach. Like that's my goal. And what I'm doing now is, and the driver of that is sort of focus on the humans, not the computers, and focus on the human connection and focus on the interplay in neighborhoods and between people. And I think that's actually like where we need to be spending. Obviously, I'm betting on it, but I think that's actually where we need to be spending time. There, of course, needs to be building the technology that gets us there. But I think that people don't go away, right? Like we have to work with each other, and I think the human connection is the non-replaceable thing for the AI, and we need to focus on that.
Yeah, on an optimistic take, like one of the kind of lines that we use in sort of the resilience community is like it's a socio-technical machine. So it's not just the machine driving, but there's people in the loop, right? So we can always. I don't want to say count on. Hope is
not a strategy.
I've heard it's not a thing that we're supposed to. Yeah,
not a strategy.
But like, there are people to at least assist in making decisions and steer things and observe problems and move in the right direction.
I want us to go there. I want us to be more creative via artificial intelligence. I really want this to be the time. Like we always say when technology comes in, we bring automation in that like that frees people up to have their time and their needs taken care of and like creative. And I really want that to be true.
So far, sometimes it works, but a little more tangible. I want to bring us back to another point. So specifically, if we skip the big philosophical angle and strictly focus on sort of the SaaSes of the world and the PaaSes and the whatevers of the world. Like, do you have like the reason why I'm picking on you is because like you're an SRE who is like further towards the edge of this technology than most people that we talk to. So I'm curious what you think are the problems with the current offerings that you think might be solutionified and turned into platformy things next? Or what's your wish list really in terms of like how to progress this stuff so that like the next round, Adam 3.0 will come around behind you and like have a better time solving problems like this?
What I really want, and people have heard this rant before, but what I really want is the software as a service, the platform as a service that is the SRE model from Google to exist in the world, right? Where, at Google,
oh shucks.
Yeah, I know. Well, we have ownership, right? Like I think that every time we had a product that we onboarded into SRE, it was a paired partnership ownership with product and with everybody involved, right? Where SRE had the full and reason and expectation of modifying the code, building the code, making it solving the aspect of reliability, often to security and things like that, right? Like would come in and we would just like, hey, we changed your code, right? Like literally, I think one of the first projects I worked on at Google when I stopped doing airline stuff was Google News. And we ported Google News from the old framework it was onto an internal framework Google has called Apps Framework, which maybe still exists, I don't know. But it offered like underlying it was like an SRE-led initiative that underlying it was all these things like load shedding and all these different reliability things that made it just much, much easier to operate at scale and much more reliable. And we did the port from the sort of bespoke
the
servlet. We, the SRE team, did the port over to Apps Framework, and it made Google News a much more stable and reliable platform, and helped it grow, or helped stay alive and grow from then on. And I wish we would see that in the world today. Like we get all these people building SRE SaaS products that are not that. They're like very reactive. They're very about monitoring, and they're very about like all these other things. And they're all reactive. They're all like, oh, we reduced your MTTR. I'm like, well, why don't you just change the code? Like, I want to check in my code, and I want it to be like, yo, I added all this stuff, right? Like that's what, and by the way, all of it's awesome now, right? Like all the reliability stuff is awesome now. Like you weren't doing multi-region, I got it configured. If you want it, here's you turn it. You weren't doing load shedding, I got it, I turned it on, right? Like that's what I want from my next SRE SaaS. I don't need more monitoring, and I don't need alerting, and I don't need like incident management or SLOs or like all that. I have all that. Like that's
isn't that
par for the
like
course.
Requisite like at the code layer? Like it's not at the platform infrastructure layer. Like
100%
it's in the code, right? Like
it's in the code. Yeah.
This isn't a platform, hot swap Indiana Jones situation. This is a like you now need to build the thing this way, right? You're going to use this framework. Yeah, there's a migration event, but like that there's a lot of. I mean, I work with customers a lot. Like migrations don't happen honestly very often. Like you
don't want them to.
Rare.
They're costly.
Yeah, they're costly, and they feel to be zero value often, or negative value potentially, right?
Yeah, if you're now introducing a maintenance burden to your development team, that's going to be, well, why am I doing this? And you're like, well, your uptime is going to go up, and you're like, I now don't understand this new platform I'm on yet. I look forward to understanding it in the future, but right now it's just the cost of understanding this is very high, and your reliability team is like, look, it's going to be great. It's like, but I haven't been convinced, and I have a bunch of new features I want out next quarter. And that sounds to me to be a discussion that we keep having. And like, if you are a big company, you can afford that cost, and your developer team will give you a lot of rope to work with. But if you're really small, that is a really difficult decision to make for your team, especially if you're working with limited budget. And I agree with you. If these things were in place all around you, you don't need to figure this out yourself. We've already built you a resilient framework. Just kind of use this one. It has load shedding in it and monitoring tools in it and, alerting in it. Just why would you do the other thing yourself? That would be madness. So
yeah, and I want the tools, the platform to effectively do the migration with zero downtime for me, right? Like I want it to be like, here's the Git commit. By the way, when we can run it and we'll split, you'll have an A/B test. We'll do it. Like, and it just does. Like, I don't have to think about it. Like, a very practical one, right? Like Django, it's an ORM for Python and a website building tool for Python. It's very, very reliable. It's been around forever. There's like migrations in it, but there's also like you have to run it like inside another framework. If run like Unicorn or UVcorn is the new one, right? And that's the async version. And like, what are the benefits of that? How do we explain that? How do we automatically port you over to it if you're in a legacy Django code base? Like, it should just do that. It should know. It should be like, and I've installed these extensions and they're configured and they're running and we tested it here, right? Like, do that. And that's what I think, like, if someone came to, Google SRE, they would own and do that. And of course, it's a little easier because the SRE org is convinced of the value of that, right?
Right.
And I think performance, for what it's worth, I think performance is the magic answer to a lot of these questions. And it was at Google too. Like when we would pitch things, people understood the value of a millisecond, right? Like, I used to go visit the GFE team, the Google front end team in Cambridge when I was there, and I go downstairs and they're writing code, and they had this big diagram on the whiteboard that was how many nanoseconds each branch of the GFE took, right? And because they cared, right? Like that mattered a significant amount, right? You're this piece of infrastructure that can't take, your budget is not milliseconds, it's nanoseconds. So like, I think, but performance results in delight, it results in the user, right? And it results in, I think, you can actually like track the value of performance, right? And so one thing you can say is, we're doing this migration not just for reliability, but also look at this cool thing, this performance thing, which actually increases your bottom line. It's a revenue generator. It's not a cost center, and we give you clarity as to why it matters. I think that's like one of the hacks you have.
There's a similar story from years before around news, but this was in if you remember there was like a downloader service for like apps that Google provided like for like Windows and Mac and stuff like that.
Oh yeah,
it was like the blob serving, but it was like one specifically for like applications. So they had like versions and package manifests and blah 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 blah. And it was like homegrown for like years and years and years. And one like very very cool software engineer who doesn't describe himself as an SRE went in and was like, I have replaced you with a small Go script because I like Go a lot. And like it's the reason why it worked was performance went through the roof. Simplification of the code, like it dropped dramatically, and like they were able to shed all of the features that they didn't really use anymore. And like no one would have done that on their own, but like he was just like a senior engineer who was like looking for something cool to do. And like that was like, I feel like that value, if we could package that concept and bring it out to the world and be like, this is actually good. Like a win executed well. Like you don't want someone spending 16 years trying to do that with a team of 55 people who constantly cycle and waste a bunch of money. But like like if you could atomically do that thing, you can get a huge amount of value out of it. And not just in terms of money and performance, but like reliability and probably security and all sorts of other things like maintainability and all these things. So that's really hard to get across to everybody, I think.
I think you're right. I think it is very, very hard to get across. I mean, I harp on performance as this. One of the reasons is because you can always show that cool graph, man, where like it's like this took 200 milliseconds, now it takes 10, right? Like those graphs are very convincing, and this is true for beyond the startup world. This is very like true in the small business, medium-sized business, big business world. Like, man, those graphs sell, right? Like you've really changed a lot, and you can point to the direct sort of monetary impact of this. Less compute, less memory, or maybe not less memory, maybe you're doing the trade-off, but like still, right? Like you get to point to it. And I think that's like, that's a big thing. And if you include in that reliability, which often you do, and I think you made a good point about like code simplification and like architectural simplification, right? Like you got rid of all the things, you got rid of all the assumptions, you understood the abstractions better, right? Like a good refactor does that. And I think, that's one of the things I'd love to see the SaaS tools start doing that. I think we're close. I think we're like a year out from really the LLMs being able to do quite a bit of that with some first human hand-holding.
The ability for an LLM to go in and like actually do open heart surgery on your code is new. Like it didn't exist. This wasn't here 5 years ago. No way.
It wasn't here like 2 years ago. I mean,
good point.
Like the first time I tried doing something 2 years ago with like Copilot, I was like, wow, you can't even do math. Right. And now I'm like, build my whole site. It's like, I got you.
Start over.
Like, great.
Do it again.
Okay. Yeah, no, exactly. It's always like, you're right. Yeah.
The other day I was vibe coding and it did something weird. I literally wrote into the chat window, not like that. And it did the right thing after.
It did the right thing. Yeah, it changed it to,
wow.
Yeah, I always feel like it's like reading the first or second design doc a junior engineer has written, and you come in and you're like, I see where you're coming from. Great assumption, but
cool
like,
plan, bro.
Yeah, like, trust me on this one. You really want to do it this way, which is the actual best practice. And so, like, then they're like, oh, cool, and they go do some research and they find
out. You can do it like an expert, and you're like, oh, okay.
Okay. You're right.
No, do it like a math, like a world class expert, like
right. And it's like, good idea. I should do it like a world class. It's like so sorry that it didn't before. I'm like, just do it before.
Well, I was trained on the internet, not the expert internet. Sorry.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, well, we're getting close to the end of our time here. So I'd like to ask you a question for a number in your travels with a unit, preferably a surprising number, like a really big number or a really tiny number or a fast number or a long number, something that really
Not a number.
is
A number with letters in
exceptional.
it, anything.
Yeah, something is like, wow, that was impressive to you, that surprised you in your studies in the world, and you're like, wow, I found out this thing when I was looking at a thing, it was like, I had no idea this is a really big thing, or this is what people need or want, or whatever it is that you would like our listeners to hear about. That's something that really impressed you.
Oh boy. Okay. I have a sort of funny anecdotal story about numbers, and that everyone and relates to my work at ITA. Is that if you know the confirmation code you get on your ticket?
The letters and numbers.
Is it
Letters and
right
numbers,
now?
right? And the reason those are letters and numbers is because is that this is not a confirmation code. This is like the flight, our first flight we took on our reservation
close
system.
to it. Yeah.
Close to it. Anyway, the confirmation code, those like 6 characters. The reason those are that is because when they first started storing your tickets and record locators on disk, that was the block address on disk of your
physically speaking.
It's a physical pointer.
On a cylinder
like,
somewhere.
So it's like literally like a physical pointer. So they just wrote. It's like imagine you print F the pointer, and you got the address, and you just like here, this is yours.
Is
this is how you find it.
Is it? Are those locator?
They're not in
they're
hex.
Not.
They're
I've seen
yeah.
Z's and stuff in there. Yeah.
Yeah, Z's and they're not in hex. They're like literally like IBM 360 disk addresses.
They're like some sort of 36 character.
Yeah, some sort of 36 character by 6. Yeah, factorial 6 or whatever it is. I didn't bad at math, and like that number that's always like really impressed me. That like the leakage. I just talk about like leaking your abstractions, but like. It worked great, right? You could find it fast. Hash tables are the most profitable data structure,
The
right?
railroad grade standard of flight locators. This is fantastic.
Of one across
Still
a very
works.
large key space. Like, let's do it.
Yeah,
Can't
let's
beat
do it.
that.
But now you have to support it, right? Like, so all the new stuff that doesn't do that, it's like, what the? Why are we supporting this?
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. The other fact that I find interesting about small business, related to small business and things like that, is one is every time I've talked to a small business owner and asked, do you use AI? They have laughed at me. 2, the median
Which way
age.
do they laugh at you? Like of course I do, or of course I don't.
Of course I do not. So the people that when you walk into a retail store, think about the technological differences, the age gap, the exposure, the cultural context of all those people is so different than what
And let's
we
remember
are.
what medians mean, like above and below that number. So that's
yeah,
pretty awesome.
Exactly. Yeah, obviously 50% above, but
Cool. Well, thank you very much, Adam. This has been a great talk, unsurprisingly. Is there anywhere that on the internet that you would like people to hear your words in other ways, or otherwise like hear you make jokes or talk about like runs you go on or whatever sort of socials you like to share?
I'm on Twitter at writeaheadlog, which if you're a database person, you will
Very
find
nice.
that somewhat funny, or perhaps not if you've ever used or had to repair one. Then you might be PTSD. My company is MarketStreet, marketst.com right now. There's a funny story about the actual domain. I'll tell you later. And then, check us out. And look, email me. And if you're like some sort of SRE that's starting a small business, I want to hear from you. It's like strange, but yeah. And computers are the best.
Cool. Thanks, Adam.
Thank you.
And
Thanks, guys.
don't forget, everyone, that hope is not a strategy. And we'll see you
Hope
next
it's not a
time.
strategy. All right, see you. Bye.
You missed a page from Telebot.